only seem to be magic. There's no real magic ever.
Those movies are crazy.
After the success of his debut genre-defining work, Night of the Living Dead, filmmaker George A. Romero was surely due that call from Hollywood. But it was over a decade before that call came.
Get me the president.
Between 1968 and 1978, Romero had to endure the frustrating hardships of low-budget filmmaking and had to keep rallying the troops in order to bring his movies to the screen.
Because I spent my life trying to convince people to join up with me. Let's do this. We can make a film.
But Romero, in true independent fashion, never gave up. After Night, Romero would make 4 features, all for well under the budget of $100,000, and suffer the painful knocks of having some of these films fail to see any form of mainstream distribution on their initial release. But it was at a screening of The Crazies, Romero's Vietnamesque infection movie,
They escape the spreading fury of the Crazies.
that he would meet producer Richard P. Rubinstein, and together they would collaborate on a $75,000 and change genre movie that would be the real beginning to Romero's career after the false start he endured after the botched release and copyright issues of Night of the Living Dead. This episode, we look at Romero's spin on gothic horror and the tropes of the vampire movie in this story about a confused young man who just happens to drink blood. This is, of course, George A. Romero's Martin. Martin was shot over a 6 to 9 week production schedule in the town of Braddock, just a short train ride away from Romero's beloved city of Pittsburgh. Romero had wanted a location for the film that was a city in decay, and it was his friend and business colleague Michael Gornick who suggested Braddock, the city where Gornick's parents had actually landed on their arrival in America.
We wound up staying in the town. And I loved, some of the, sort of the way it was, crumbling. And the sense of loss and it's sort of the American dream crumble was incredible.
Gornick would become the cinematographer on Martin, and this was to begin a collaboration between Michael Gornick and George Romero that would last throughout a stunning run of movies, until they unfortunately parted ways after they had their creative and personal differences on Romero's 3rd zombie installment,
George A. Romero's Day of the Dead.
And although they ended on rough terms, the two remained friends. And to this day, we can hear them on fantastic commentaries on many releases of their films together. But without Gornick, I think Romero's films wouldn't have this great look that we see in them today. Romero was always a true independent, and has said that he found it really hard to give up his position as camera operator to Gornick, as he loved to control every aspect of making his movies.
He stepped off the bench and started to shoot, did a sensational job. Gradually you have to give those luxuries up. If I had my way, I'd still do it all myself.
It's an interesting side point to look at the change in Romero's work after Martin, Dawn of the Dead, Creepshow, and Day of the Dead. After these films, Romero broke ties with his production company Laurel and Richard P. Rubinstein. And although he was still involved in scripting fantastic works for them like Tales from the Dark Side the movie and Creepshow 2, after Day of the Dead, he would never work with the same complete team of hard-working independents again. This was obviously a change that came with the move into bigger budget and more Hollywood movies for Romero, which is an understandable move to make, as this was the next creative evolution in his career that would be making films that would have wider distribution, like Monkey Shines.
Man is the only animal capable of murder. Until now.
And The Dark Half.
Based upon a book by Stephen King, comes George A. Romero's masterful vision of a nightmare come true.
But with more studio involvement comes more stress and more limitations. His ex-wife and collaborative partner, Christine Forrest, comments on this change in production values.
When we made Martin and Night Riders and Dawn of the Dead, there was no unions. I mean, if we had to work 12 hours, we did it. 15 hours, we did it. Starting with Monkey Shines, it was a SAG and a union film, and it changes the whole atmosphere with that. You know, I didn't realize at the time how special it was. And, you know, I thought maybe this is the way it was. But, you know, you later realize, I don't think so.
I think this is worth mentioning, as Romero's later works are movies that I also consider masterworks. But there is a definite shift in the look and feel to these movies. And it is perhaps this low-budget, non-union, all-hands-on-deck approach to filmmaking from Romero's earlier career that makes these works special, and why they continue to be cherished from fans the world over, and why they keep finding new audiences, because they have a highly original look and feel.
There's always Vanilla and Jack's Wife were seen by, very few people. And I don't know what my fans today will take from them. There's always something instinctive. I mean, you can look at an artist's work, even if he changes styles over the years. There's, you can always maybe see a little something there that connects you or says, oh yeah, I can recognize that. I can see the person in there.
I think they perhaps influence us more as they are works of a team of hard-working film lovers who just wanted to make the best movies they could. And this is visible in all of Romero's earlier works. The passion for movie making is clear to see on screen, and especially in Martin, with its cramped locations, minimal lighting, 16mm feel and crew of 15 at most technicians.
Tom and I had met years before when the first film that we were going to try to make, we needed 2 young people. And so we went around and looked at high school plays. And I met Tom. He was in a high school play.
I was doing the makeup effects but he cast me in a role, and I wound up doing stunts as well.
And he had his typical enthusiasm, and I said, great, man, you're just in time. We got this project going.
The friendship and camaraderie that comes with working on low budgets affects what we see on screen and makes Martin a work of truly independent creativity and off-the-cuff filmmaking that makes it shine. And it's that shine that is often missing from Romero's studio or bigger budget compositions. Romero himself has said on many occasions that Martin is one of his personal favorites of all of his works.
It's still my favorite of my movies. I think the cast and crew, numbered, 15 in total. Everybody just put out 120%. We just had a great time.
This is just a personal theory, of course, but it's one I've often thought about. Why do some films stand out from the crowd? And maybe this is some kind of answer of why we love Martin so much.
We didn't have a big crew, though, so...
You're looking at it. Here it is.
Here's Tony and Nick. Tony and Nick and George. Yeah, maybe 5 or 6 people.
5 people.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Everybody jumped in and got the job done.
Back to Martin and its locations. I've always thought that the town becomes just as much of a character in the film as Martin himself. Cuda, who is in vampire lore what you could call the Van Helsing character of the film.
I'm Cuda. Come, we must take another train.
The townsfolk, the dilapidated buildings and alleyways all become a metaphor for dying tradition.
An old person needs a priest who believes in the old ways.
The film looks drained as it was shot on reversal 16mm film stock, which literally means you shoot the positive and there is no negative to save cost. Martin has an incredible look to it. The texture of the 16mm film itself feels as the industrial town that is dying and drained of blood and life, just as Martin's victims become physically drained as he drinks their life force, their blood. This might be reading too much into it, but Romero has never been one to shy away from metaphors and social commentary in his works.
People have written about these films and say, well, if you really look deep underneath, you'll find these things. And I don't think they're deep underneath at all. They're sort of right there in your face, right up front.
This was an important place in their lives.
Horror, fantasy has always been a way to, get your views through. They're parables.
On Romero's editing in the film, it's impactful and full of original style and canted camera angles that his crew said were totally unscripted, as Romero knew exactly what he wanted and knew how things would cut together in his head, even if his cinematographer didn't.
In those days, we didn't have a continuity person or anything like that. George remember everything.
George had this almost photographic memory.
He knew what he wanted, exactly what coverage, down to like how the razor blade should fall on the sink.
That's why he could make a film like that so fast. I mean, you know, he had all the tools in his mind.
Romero often said that in the early days his technique was to simply shoot loads of angles to cover his ass in the editing room. A lot of the skill that Romero brought to his movies as an editor, I think, is part of what really makes them stand out.
I wish you could shoot me up with drugs, take away a piece of my brain or something.
Jack's Wife or Season of the Witch, The Crazies, Martin and Dawn of the Dead all feature his unique montage-style editing techniques that really give the movies an original look and feel that often seems to unfold in real time from multiple angles. Just like the eye would see small details in the world. Some might call it disjointed, which I totally understand, as some shots only seem to last a few frames. But Romero was always meticulous at getting these strange inserts and point of view shots, and in my opinion, I think it's that style that makes the worlds that Romero creates feel much bigger than their small budgets. It seems that out of necessity, he created his own style, which in his earlier works, I've always felt gives us the true mark of a Romero film, and his personal style seems to be ingrained in every frame of these movies. And I think that's part of what makes them really special.
Season of the Witch, my original title for it was Jack's Wife.
Depart and go to thy proper place. So mote it be.
So it was really it was real guerrilla filmmaking. But I love it. I love the theme of it. And it might even be more pertinent today, you know, a woman who's just opening those doors and wanting to expand her horizons. There are still a lot of guys out there that just keep women locked in cages, in a sense.
Malorum redix fomis vitiorium quid stas.
Originally, Romero had wanted to print the film completely in black and white. And there has been some rumbles on the web that the original 3.5-hour black and white version may soon be up for auction. This original version was cut down for distribution with the help from so-called industry pros, and Michael Gornick has said it was sad to watch as Romero sat at the editing table, literally being told by industry professionals or consultants what he should keep in Martin and what he should lose.
The first cut of Martin was 4 hours and 26 minutes. But he struggled with this long cut, and finally he brought in an advisor who was Ben Barinholtz, who was a New York producer. And the two of them sat down one night. I was there. It was painful to watch. And Ben Barinholtz would say, take that out, and George cut it out.
Although this original black and white version would be a treat, personally, I absolutely love the film that we have, which along with Romero's great flick Night Riders is, for me, one of his best and most personal works.
Mr. Romero, sind Sie ein Moralist?
To be categorized that way eventually.
Ich hoffe, später einmal so eingestuft zu werden. Daher wehre ich mich manchmal dagegen, nur als kommerzieller Filmemacher angesehen zu werden. Als ein Verrückter, der Blutfilme und sowas dreht. Ich bin sicher, alle meine Filme haben eine moralische Aussage.
The best way I've heard the film's themes described was from the film's producer, Richard Rubinstein, who said that Martin is a sympathetic monster, like Frankenstein. He is the way he is through no fault of his own. Martin is unsure of who he is because he has had his identity thrust upon him by his family's archaic views.
Nosferatu!
He is evil because Cousin Cuda and his family have brought him up to believe that he is evil.
Most of the monsters that George taught me to like or love were monsters that basically were put in positions that they weren't of their own making, okay, and they were reacting in some way that was not because they were innately malicious or bad, okay, but they were trapped by their circumstances.
Yeah. The real tragedy of Martin is that when he finally sees what he considers care and emotion from another human being, which is what he's been aching for, it turns out they too are using Martin for for some misguided self-fulfillment.
I'm all dressed now. Why are you crying? Did I hurt you? What did I do?
It's nothing to do with you.
Really?
Really.
When that person takes their own life, Martin is left in the void. His innocence has been exploited in many more ways than one.
Boy, do I wish what you have is catching.
Some people think it is catching.
His love has been taken for another self-validation, and Cuda is using Martin to keep his own religious and blindsided ways of life alive as his world crumbles around him. Cuda is as much misguided and twisted as Martin is.
Do you believe the devil can enter a person's soul?
I don't know what to believe about that.
This is not what an old person wants to hear from a priest.
When the two meet, it ends the only way that it can for Martin. He lived as a vampire, so he dies like one.
Your soul is damned. Nosferatu.
But it was all fallacy, because as Martin says repeatedly, there is no real magic. All there really is a decaying world that almost everyone refuses to see, and in Martin, they hold on to the past and use him to validate their own beliefs, keep their religious practices alive, and even profit from him, as the talk show host in the movie does. That instead of seeing a misguided kid who needs help, he sees audience figures. It's like the whole world is against him, and in true Gothic style, the villagers and their pitchforks and torches come out and chase him down. And Martin himself becomes the ultimate victim.
You get used to things, you know?
Yeah, sure.
You get used to your life. And it all gets easier.
Martin truly is what I would call an independent masterpiece. It's rough around the edges to look at, but once you give yourself over to it, it seems like the city of Braddock is the same as Dracula's crumbling castle. Everything we see in the movies is magic, but when you take a close look at real life, there is true horror all around us. Romero uses Martin as a canvas to discuss the decaying values of modern society, and uses a disillusioned young man who is caught in the middle of it all to tell his story. He takes the vampire myth, and like he did once before in Night of the Living Dead, he uses the horror genre to give us a critique of modern society.
And that's another thing about those movies. Vampires always have ladies. Sometimes lots of ladies. Well, that's wrong too. It's just a costume.
Martin is an outstanding piece of independent filmmaking made by a crew who gave their all because they really wanted to make it. And it is this passion that is imprinted on the soul of the movie that is there for us all to see. Martin was made by a filmmaker who truly had something to say about the world. And I think Martin is one of Romero's best films because of it.
It isn't magic. Even I know that.
Thanks for watching my take on George A. Romero's Martin. If you would like to see more films about Romero and other filmmakers, please remember to like and subscribe. If you would like to support the channel, we have the Super Thanks option, which you can find below the video. And please, let me know your thoughts on this classic movie in the comments below. And as always, thanks so much for listening.